Hello, guys, and welcome back to Stephencministries. I've got a really incredible episode here for you today, but it does contain some graphic content, which is why I just wanted to quickly warn you that if things like sex work, sexual sin, and exploitation of people or mental health challenges are something that upsets you or something that you have some trauma around, I would give today's episode a miss. However, if that doesn't apply to you today, this is definitely the most powerful testimony, I think, and the most emotionally intense testimony we've ever had on the channel. And I know you're going to enjoy it. Stick around till the end because God does something really amazing. Enjoy. Jocelyn, I want to thank you for coming on today and being willing to share a little bit more about your story. I understand that that starts pretty young for you, actually, and I'm looking forward to getting into all of that. I'm going to link everybody, I'm going to link all of your details in the description box below so that everybody can find your book, yourself on Instagram, and so on. And so, yeah, could you maybe start by explaining a little bit about how your childhood sort of played a role in your testimony?
Yeah, definitely. So in my childhood, I actually grew up in church. So my parents were pastors. They started their own church plant. And so I was really active in church when I was younger. And during that time, from the time I was really little, like since I can remember, I always had supernatural experiences with the Lord. So I would have dreams. I didn't get visions until I was older, probably like around, I don't know, like maybe 26, 27. But I was constantly having dreams that were very symbolic. I would get sensations. I would just know things spiritually and couldn't explain why. So yeah, I definitely was really in tune with that. And I was really close with the Lord. I would actually like write God letters and everything when I was little. But I definitely went through some things as well. When I was really little, at our home church, like the church where we branched out from, when I was little, I was also getting a lot of nightmares around this time. My sister, my older sister, she got involved in Wicca when she was in high school. So she would bring home things into our room because we shared a room. So during that time, I would get a lot of nightmares too and wake up just seeing things, hearing things, and things just started to deteriorate. My parents got a divorce and their church ended after that, obviously. But we went through a lot, not just from our own sin as a family, but also the way the church had treated us as well, with a lot of condemnation, spreading rumors, not really being there to help when we asked for help. So I ended up, like many people, having some bitterness towards the church in general. And after that, I mean, so many things happened. I ended up in an abusive relationship for 6 years. It was through like high school and the first 2 years of college. And yeah, that was a whole first part of my life.
Wow, it sounds like you've had a lot going on there, and I'm really sorry to hear that that's some of the stuff you've had to struggle with even from such a young age. And so you mentioned that your sister was sort of involved in the occult. Did that influence you at all, or did you sort of stay on the path that your parents were on, which is, in church ministry and stuff like that, at least originally? Or did you find yourself drawn to darker things as you started to grow up and develop?
Yeah, actually, I was not drawn to it at all. Like, I thought it was scary. I saw the demonic side of things. And I would be able to pick up, like, if I was around someone like one of her friends or walking past a Wicca store, I didn't know anything about the occult, like, at all. But even being around people that were involved in it, like her friends, like I said, or a Wicca store, I would get sensations on my body, on my skin, inside my stomach, and I wouldn't know how to explain it, but I would feel something really dark and something that would make me feel sick, that like I could feel something tangibly like kind of crawling on my skin. I would get chills. And so I just had this instinct to stay away from that. So I actually didn't have any attraction to it. I wasn't interested at all. I remember my sister had something, I think it was like a little chest on her dresser. I can't remember what it was, but it had maybe like some amulets or some crystals or something in it. I can't remember exactly what, but I remember looking in it because I was curious. Like, not, I didn't actually want it. I just wondered, what is this? Like, she's talking about it, but I wonder what it is. And then after that, I would just leave it. But she would sneak things like that in the house and put it on her dresser. So yeah, I wasn't attracted to it at all. It wasn't until maybe, maybe like late high school, early college, where I started to get into zodiac signs. And, I thought that was harmless. I didn't even associate that with the occult because it's so
Right.
mainstream in our culture now. So you don't even think of it as being part of the occult. But really, that's where it started. It all started with my obsession with personality quizzes. Like, even during that time, there were a lot of personality quizzes, like on Facebook, even MySpace, like before Facebook. Everyone wanted to take a personality quiz and stuff. But that stuff, it leads you down to other darker paths. So if you're into personality quizzes, you're going to start gravitating towards astrology and things like that. So that's where it kind of started.
And so when you were in college, that's kind of where you became interested in the occult. And were there some other practices that you were involved in? How were things going for you in college? You mentioned that you were in an abusive relationship, which I'm sure must have been difficult. And did you sort of come out of that? How did your college years look for you?
Well, I wasn't involved in any other form of the occult in college except looking into astrology, really. I wasn't into horoscopes. I was just really into looking up, Gemini, because that was my sign. So I would look into it a lot, just kind of research, just trying to understand who I was, why I was the way that I was. And yeah, besides that, I didn't get into any other form of the occult in early college. I was in an abusive relationship up until about the second year of college. And this is when I started to have a mental breakdown. I already had symptoms of some issues when I was younger, when I was hearing voices and stuff like that. And I ended up on an antibiotic that I actually had an allergic reaction to, one that could have been fatal. So I was in the hospital because of that. And I believe it was probably a couple months after that where I just finally hit rock bottom in that relationship. And I ended up leaving because I was living with the guy at the time. It was absolutely just terrible. Um, I ended up living with my dad, but because of the abuse and the gaslighting, I started to question what was real and what wasn't. So he would tell me things like, this never happened. Like, the abuse never happened. You're being dramatic, you're exaggerating. So because he would do that so much, I started to question my reality. And remember, I was already having, situations from the time I was little of like psychosis, but it was demonically based. So especially during this time, I started to, self harm. There would be times where I would just completely lose my mind and just take knives and start scratching on the wall to avoid cutting myself. And I would have like these manic fits of just freaking out, not being able to sleep at night, and then all of a sudden being able to sleep all day and all night. And I was still in college. This was probably, yeah, this was around the second year. And then one day I just started planning my suicide. So I figured, I I had been in this really gross, terrible situation for so long. Um, and I just completely snapped and was planning my suicide. And what's actually interesting, I haven't said this in any of the interviews because in most of the interviews we focus on new age stuff, but it's really important to understand, like, when you don't know that intrusive thoughts, it's demons. Oftentimes it can be that if it's not your flesh, it's something demonic, especially depending on how drastic it is. Because I didn't have that understanding when I was little, um, and I was already going through, some traumas and emotional issues. I had trouble differentiating what was the voice of the Lord and what was the voice of a demon. So I was very spiritually sensitive, and there was actually one moment when I was about to enter high school that I was looking out my window in my bedroom and I saw the guy who I ended up with for those 6 years. He was walking down the street, and I heard a voice tell me that he changed my life. And I had no attractions to the guy at all. I didn't even want to be with him. I didn't know who it was. But I remember, because I heard that voice, I thought it was God. And I started obsessing over it. And I was like, I wonder who that is. I wasn't thinking like, oh, he's my husband. I was trying to understand because I heard this voice so clearly. And because I couldn't distinguish what was the voice of the Lord and what was a demon, especially with all this stuff going on in my bedroom with the Wicca things and all of that, it led me down such a dark path for years. I had no discernment. And by that time I was basically under a spell because I did things I would have never done. So yeah, this led me down a dark path. I was planning my suicide, and one day I just ran out of my dad's place because I couldn't take it. I started driving down the highway and I ended up at a river on a bridge. And I looked down and I just started crying out to God, like, why did you leave me? Why did you desert me? And I was planning to jump off. And once I leaned over the edge, I saw a creature in the water, like tangibly. This wasn't just some image in my mind, it was a tangible thing I saw. I saw it was like a sea dragon and it was in the water. And I saw not its head, I saw its body come up over the waves. And I saw black scales, like it was black, long, and slimy. Like think of kind of like a Leviathan or something you would see. And like those ancient drawings and maps where you see them in the water. That's what it looked like. And I remember it was so weird because it was almost like I felt like I was crossing over. So just by looking at it, I wasn't like, whoa, what was that? It almost seemed normal. It's just kind of hard to explain. But I ended up moving away and going towards the rocks because I thought maybe jumping into the rocks would be a faster death. But as I was leaning over and crying, someone pulled over the side of the road and a man came out of his car in a suit. And he was like, excuse me, like, are you okay? Were you planning to jump? And I was like, no, no, I'm not. And he ended up calling the police and they took me to a mental hospital. And to this day, I do believe that man was an angel. Like that whole road was so deserted. No one was driving up that way. And even just the way he looked, like he was so holy. He was in a suit. Like I can't even remember his face at all. I just remember he looked so kind. He looked so holy. And it was so quick. It was like just a brief moment. And then he just ended up driving away. So that yeah, that was the end of that relationship. But it took me down this road of antipsychotic medications, mental health diagnoses, and that made me even more attracted to the occult, not just astrological signs, but going deep into the supernatural to find answers, to find healing for my own brain.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's a lot for you to have been processing at a pretty young age. So, how did your life change after you came out of the hospital and after that relationship ended? Can you kind of take us through that? What did it look like for you at that point when you started to get into the occult and you were on these medications? You had some diagnoses. I mean, that must have been a lot for you to even begin to process. Although you were having those experiences from young, it's still, I think anybody that goes
Yeah.
through that, it would be huge. How did your life sort of change after that?
Well, it changed a lot. There were certain things that just got so much better. My mom was a big part of my healing process. She took me in and helped take care of me after being in the mental hospital. Those were some of my best memories, like my mom just helping me. But yeah, during that time, I actually ended up dancing at a dance studio, and they mentored me to dance. Sorry, I'm already getting emotional. I knew this was going to happen
No,
today.
of course, it's fine.
They mentored me at this dance studio, and I started dancing a lot. And I already had a passion for the arts when I was younger. I always loved the arts and science. Those were two things I really liked. But I loved playing piano. I loved singing, writing music, and dance. So I got into this dance studio and I learned ballroom. I got a ballroom certification. I was performing. I ended up in pageantry. I ended up public speaking. I mean, there were so many amazing things that happened that were so like, it was supernatural that these things happened. But, I was still like in and out with the Lord because when I got out the mental hospital, I was like, you know what, I really need to seek God. But there were still so many issues I had in my heart that I hadn't addressed. And I still had bitterness towards the church too. So I was in and out of it. I wasn't really taking my walk with the Lord seriously. I was still living in the world and, praying at the same time. And this was where, the other side of my life, the personal side of my life that I wasn't showing other people was actually getting worse. So I was on different types of medications because the psychologist didn't know exactly what my diagnosis was. They were saying, okay, you definitely have PTSD, depression, anxiety, but then they kept switching it up. Okay, maybe it's not depression. Maybe it's just anxiety. And then they finally pinpointed a specific diagnosis, which was manic bipolar with psychotic symptoms. So, what that means is that I had a certain type of bipolar that wasn't up and down constantly, but I would have longer periods of time of lows and then longer periods of times of highs. And the psychotic symptoms part had to do with me feeling sensations that weren't real, they said basically, and just having episodes of like euphoria. So I would have these episodes where I would get intense anxiety. A lot of it was trauma based, thinking about my past, but sometimes I wouldn't even be thinking about my past and it would just come over me. And then I would just have urges to do something random. Like I wanted to do something risky, something random. I wanted to stand over a waterfall just over the edge. I didn't want to kill myself, but I wanted to do something risky. And that's part of the diagnosis of manic bipolar, where you have long periods of time where you feel like you can rule the world and like this weird sense of just power, kind of like you're on a drug. And then you have these extreme lows. So in my extreme lows, I would have these episodes of just being on the ground, pulling up grass, um, and I would feel just these chills over my arms, like specifically my arms, feeling like I couldn't feel my body or that I couldn't be grounded. And then I would have these this sensation that I didn't know if I was here or not. Like if this was real life or if I was dreaming. So that was like the psychotic part where I was a little, losing my mind basically. So there was one time I had an episode like that where someone called the police because I was in the middle of the street doing that, like just on the ground in the road, freaking out. So, but in those moments, I didn't even think about how embarrassing it was until afterwards because I just felt like I was losing my mind. It was absolutely terrible. So, there was that going on in my personal life, even though things with dance were going great and I was so ambitious with my dreams and going after all these things and succeeding, and I had people helping me, I had support. And then, as far as the pageantry and the public speaking, there was nothing spiritual about it. So I got into public speaking because of the pageantry. It actually happened on accident that someone asked me to go up front and speak at an event where I was just there because I was a pageant queen at the time. And they thought I was a different pageant queen who was scheduled to speak. But there was no time because they were running late. So they're like, just go, just talk about your life and all this. And I was like, I was so confused because they thought I was a different person. But when I went up and took the microphone and started speaking, I felt something come over me that I had never felt before. And I was like, wow, this feels so natural. This feels, it wasn't it wasn't like I was power tripping or anything. I didn't feel that at all. It just, when you do something where it feels like, you just know you were born to do it. It feels so natural and it feels like you're drinking water, like you're doing something that actually is healthy for your body, for all parts of you that you didn't even know you needed. And that's what happened. So that was my first time speaking. So I started doing these events and all of that where I was focusing more on public speaking and it was great. But then at the same time, I had a double life. I was doing that, but I was still finishing up college. I was broke. Because part of the reason was because I had spent so much of my money on this guy that I was with who was abusing me. I had gone into debt, all this stuff. And I was so broke. And I was also helping other people financially, like people that were close to me. And I kind of used that as an excuse to have this double life of being a stripper. So I started off go-go dancing first, and I was like, I would never get into stripping. That's way out of hand. I could never take off my clothes all the way. But once you get desensitized to one level, it's easy to go to the next one. So that's what happened to me. I ended up stripping on and off for probably about 2 years in my hometown. And I was just doing that all secretly. My closest friends knew I did, but anyone outside of my closest friends, they just didn't know about it.
Yeah. So, oh my goodness. So there's a lot to cover there. That must have been
Yes.
another really, really impactful part of your life. I have family who have a similar diagnosis, and it's not easy. So, thank you for your vulnerability and coming on a podcast and being willing to talk about all that. Because certainly, I know from my own experience being online, it's not easy to talk about that. So, thank you. Um, so you're getting into this point now where you're leaving that relationship, you're starting to strip to support yourself, and you've had some mental health issues, but you've also been encountering the supernatural, which must have been really difficult for you because as Christians, we do believe we can, encounter the supernatural. And you're having to deal with struggling with your mental health and medication on top of that. I can't imagine how difficult that must have been for you. Um, so take us through what happens next in your story.
Yes. So I was on and off different types of medications. And then they finally put me on one that seemed to stick, that it seemed to affect me in the ways that we wanted.
Hey guys, sorry for the brief interruption. I just wanted to say that if you're on any medication, if you're coming off any medication, if you have a similar diagnosis to Jocelyn, please speak to your primary care doctor. This podcast isn't intended to be an example of how to come on or off medications. This is just Jocelyn sharing her story. So please speak to your doctor or psychiatrist. And I don't even say that to protect myself or Jocelyn. I say that to protect you because it can be really dangerous to play around with your medications without the care and guidance of your doctor. So thanks and enjoy the rest of the podcast.
So yeah, so I was on that for a couple of years. And then things started to progress more and more. Um, I was still, like living this double life. Um, I really hated it. I had to drink to deal with it. And I was experiencing crazy stuff there. Like there was probably twice that I felt like I heard a voice in my head telling me to stop stripping, like to just stop. And I would be like, okay, I'll just stop temporarily. And when that would happen, I would find out a couple days or so later there was a shooting in the club or something really dangerous happened where I could have gotten shot, I could have gotten killed.
Wow.
So I knew it was God. I knew that was God. I was like, God is still speaking to me somehow. And I was still having dreams and stuff, but I wasn't really taking them seriously. I just wanted to pursue dance so much. And I knew I wanted to speak to the masses. I was like, I love public speaking, but I always felt like something was missing because when I would listen to other public speakers, and I was speaking specifically on domestic violence awareness, inspirational type things. But I never talked about God. It's all secular stuff, you know. And I would have young girls come up to me after I would speak, telling me I need help because I'm going through the same thing you went through. Please help me. And I would talk with them and then direct them to the right person. But I was like, how come this doesn't feel fulfilling? I feel like I can never get to the root of these problems. And I knew people that loved listening to motivational speakers, and most speakers like listening to other speakers because it inspires them and it helps, with their own creative process and knowing how to communicate better to a large audience, that kind of thing. But I never did. I never liked listening to motivational speakers. And I was like, because every time I listen to a speaker, I feel like the words are so empty, like it's all these positive things, just positivity, positive this, and they're all repeating the same things just in different ways. It's all different packaging. And I was like, how come it's still like doesn't get to the root of people's problems?
Mm.
Why am I still on medication? And I knew I didn't want to be on medication. So I was looking for something better, you know, but I was still living in sin. I was still doing all this other stuff. I loved, I was drinking. I wasn't drinking as much as I used to because being on antipsychotics, you can't drink much because it's actually dangerous. So I was still pushing my limits though. Um, but I'd probably say it was when I was about to graduate college. So I had taken a semester off when I had the suicide attempt. I ended up in the mental hospital one more time, probably about a year and a half or 2 years later, just because I was on the wrong type of medication and it was causing me to have a downward spiral.
Yep.
So after all this, I had maybe like 2 semesters left of college and I was finally going to graduate. And I was in my car. I had gone to the bank really late at night to do like a cash deposit, still barely making any money. I was still at the dance studio, which I loved. I was there and I was picking up side jobs here and there, just trying to make more money. And I pulled up back at my mom's place because I was still with her ever since the mental hospital. And I just got so angry. And I was sitting in my car and I was yelling at God. I was like, who are you even? What am I supposed to do with my life? This doesn't make any sense. My life doesn't make any sense. I want to do something with my life. I don't want to be broke anymore. I hate this. And like just screaming. I was like, who are you? What do you want with me? That was the last thing I yelled. What do you want with me? What do you want? And I was angry. So I was like hitting my steering wheel, just so mad, just like pounding it and just screaming in my car. And it was really late at night. Nobody heard me. And then after I did that, I felt someone push me in my seat. So I was in the driver's seat. I just go back and I laid in my chair and I felt like I couldn't move. So I could not move. Like I felt like I was sinking into the chair. And so I pushed my seat back because I was like, okay, if I can't sit up, I might as well just lay all the way back. So I laid back and I started praying. And I had been praying. Like I knew what experiences with the Holy Spirit was like because I had them when I was little. Like I used to go to summer camps in church. I knew what that experience was. But I was praying in my car and I knew God was in the car. Like I knew he was there. I felt the air change. And then I looked around and all my windows had fogged up with air. Just they were all foggy out of nowhere. And there wasn't a big temperature difference between in the car and outside, so that it wasn't condensation. Um, it just happened. Like it all just got foggy in my car. And I still couldn't move. I couldn't sit up. And then this was when I had my first vision experience ever. And it wasn't anything tangible that I could see in front of me, like when I saw that creature in the water, which I know now that was a demon for sure, like back when I was attempting suicide. But it was like I was dreaming, but I was awake. And I could not stop the images. It was like a story that was unfolding in my mind. And my eyes were open and I started shaking, like I couldn't stop what was being shown to me. And it was my life. It was the future. Um, it was God showing me different scenes from the future. And some of it had to do with a family member, most of it had to do with like ministry. But at the time, I didn't know it was ministry. I was so closed off to the idea because I wasn't fully walking with the Lord. I was still in the world, still thinking about dancing and nightclub dancing and all of that. So I was so blown away by what I saw, but it made me so happy. It gave me a joy I'd never had before. And I was just crying tears of joy, like, wow, like, is that what God thinks of me? Like, I don't think of myself like that. I couldn't even see myself doing these things. They're so like supernatural. And I heard a voice, and once again, it wasn't audible. It was just a voice that came into my mind. It's so hard to describe, but it was the Lord, and He was saying, "You are going to be my light." And He said a couple things about my voice, about how He was going to use my voice. And I was in shock, and I was just crying and crying, like, "Wow, this is so beautiful. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." I went back home. I was so shook. Like I couldn't go to sleep. I was like, who can I call? But all of my friends were in the world. Like most of my friends, were smoking and drinking, doing all this stuff. Um, Even though they were great friends, but we wouldn't talk about supernatural things. Like I probably had like 2 friends I could talk about this stuff with because I did still experience supernatural things, but I would mostly keep it to myself. But I was like, who can I tell about this? Like, who can help me understand it? Because I didn't understand what happened to me. So after that, I was going from church to church, trying to find answers with no intention of fully giving up sin. I just wanted answers to my visions, and I wanted them to come true. After that, you know, I was having dream and dream, vision after vision. Like, it opened something up to the supernatural. Now it wasn't just the Lord, it was the enemy, because the enemy knew that the Lord had visited me. So the devil came in full force with like visions, dreams. I would wake up hearing people in the kitchen screaming, like it was demons, but I would audibly hear things now. Like before, I couldn't audibly just hear things. It was so many stuff like that. And I was like, you know what? I have to do something with this. I have to do something about this vision. I can't stop these dreams. I can't stop visions from happening. What is this? What am I supposed to do? And my first thought was, let me just move away. So I already had a desire to move to another city to continue my pursuit of dance because I felt like I was hitting a ceiling here with my passion. And then with all these supernatural things happening to me, I started to wonder, okay, I need to go somewhere. I need to seek and find. And then I started seeing the words LA pop up everywhere, like Los Angeles. Like people started mentioning it a lot. I started seeing it everywhere. I was like, you know what? Maybe I just need to go there because that's a great place for the arts anyway. And then maybe this is where my dream, my vision will come true. Like something will happen. And yeah, after that, that's, I think it was about a year after I had that vision. That was when I moved to Los Angeles.
That's incredible. Yeah, I love everything you just had to say. And it's interesting. Obviously, some people watching this won't be Christians and they might be skeptical. But one of the things that I think adds validity to the fact that you were experiencing things that were supernatural in origin, that it wasn't just sort of a mental health thing, is even the way that you're warned about events that are to come, right? Like shootings in a club. And so you miss your schedule there. That indicates to me that, you're experiencing something genuinely supernatural. So your story is incredible. And so now you're heading to LA in order to pursue your dreams, sort of based on the visions you've been having. Can you take us through that? Like, how is LA for you?
LA was absolutely crazy. Um, I went there with the idea of just working in the industry, being a backup dancer for singers, for rappers, whoever it may be. Um, I had that idea. I thought of the vision I had. Maybe that'll come true. Maybe I'll end up public speaking again. And it was so many things that I did not expect at all. But God had drawn me in such a way that was because of that situation, it was undeniable. And there was absolutely no way of me going back. It would be impossible. So in LA, I ended up moving in with someone that I met through a Facebook group because you can find roommates through Facebook groups, especially for big cities. And I moved in with her, and she was heavily into New Age. And she told me ahead of time, like she had crystals everywhere in the apartment. Like she was deep in it. She wasn't just in astrology. She was doing all the rituals with shamans. She was taking the psychedelics. She was going through all that stuff. She was fully vegan. And I was like, like that's fine. I don't really care. You know, I thought it was stupid. So I just would like laugh at it. And so when I moved in, I quickly saw that I was going to have issues with her as my roommate. There was a lot of really weird stuff going on. Um, it got really weird. It got pretty creepy um, with my roommate, and it was such a toxic situation. I ended up picking up some jobs, like some odd jobs. I went over there without having a job lined up. I just had maybe, I think about $2,000 altogether, but that thousand was going towards my first month of rent. So then I only had about 1,000 left over. My first weekend there, I went out with a friend who was a dancer who I already knew. We went out to a nightclub. There was a guy that I met out there who approached me because he was a Puerto Rican. He could tell I was. So he started talking to me, automatically flirting with me, automatically trying to impress me with buying me huge bouquets of flowers, like flashing money stuff. And I found out he was in the Brooklyn Zoo, which was a rap group that Wu-Tang Clan started. So they were all connected to Wu-Tang Clan. He offered to help me. He said, if you need anything, if you want to work at a club as a stripper, like that was automatically thrown in my face when I moved to LA, be a stripper. So it's like as soon as you go into LA, especially if you're in the industry, everywhere you go is an audition. So if someone looks at you and they think you have a look for this or for that, they're going to try it, because so many people out there are not just scammers, they're pimps in so many different ways. So people are constantly wanting to sell some type of product or sell you. So that's exactly what happened to me. I ended up involved with this guy. I got scammed like within my first couple weeks there. So my whole account was wiped and I didn't get my money back till it was probably like maybe 3, 4 weeks later. So this guy helped me out. It was very difficult to find a job. So once again, I ended up in underground nightlife, but this time it was so much worse. So I started off with being a karaoke hostess, which I saw the ad on Craigslist. I knew it was shady, but I was like, you know what? I do know Koreatown is known for its karaoke clubs. Maybe it is pretty harmless. Like maybe I am just hosting and I'm bringing people fruits, and whatever. So I show up to the interview and 2 Korean men come over and sit down across from me and they start explaining what it is. And I was like, whoa, 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 wait a minute. I said, wait, are we expected to like have sex with these men in the rooms? And they were like, no, 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 no. We don't want you to do that. We have daughters. We don't want you to do that. Um, some of the girls, they do extra things for money. That's up to you. But if you have sex in the rooms, you will get fired immediately. So there were some girls that wouldn't go that far. They usually wouldn't make much money. Most of the time they wouldn't. Um, in the beginning, um, I had a client. There were a lot of Koreans that would, because obviously it was Koreatown, but there would be mafias that would rent karaoke rooms. So one of the worst experiences I had was um, um, sorry.
You don't have to go into any detail about anything that makes you uncomfortable, by the way. Please don't feel like you need to go into all the details or anything like that. If an
Yeah.
experience is hard for you, just skim over it.
Yeah, I think I'm a little extra sensitive today.
Of course,
Normally I
that's
can talk
totally
about things
fine.
that
Yeah,
shy.
you don't have to go into it at all.
Yeah. I'll just touch on a few things. There were definitely men that would get really aggressive. It was crazy because even though that stuff would happen, I felt like I had to go back and I would feel like this weird addiction to it, especially because of the first night. The first guy that rented me was our Armenian man, um, old enough to be my dad. He rented me for it was probably like 3 hours and he tipped me. It was about $600. So um there's definitely a lot of drinking involved, so that helped with the sedation. But it was absolutely terrible. Like you're treated like an animal. So you go in the rooms and you have to show yourself off and stuff. And if they don't like you, and if you don't get picked for hours after going on to these different clubs, it affects your self-esteem. You start thinking like, I'm not pretty enough or something. And I would have men just tell me straight up, like sometimes they would pull me aside and be like, we think you're really pretty, but we only like Korean girls. Or they would say, and we only want Japanese girls in the room. And so I would have that, you know. Um, so there was one night I was drugged, and that was a terrible situation. And after that, I quit. But it took something that drastic for me to quit. And then after that, I started stripping again. So I stripped at a couple different clubs in LA. Around this time, this was when stripping wasn't making as much money as it used to because there were new tax laws on
Mm.
strippers that were going on in LA. So a lot of these girls they were actually commuting to Vegas to work because strippers just aren't making as much money stripping anymore in LA. They're just not. Um, so I started doing that, and I was still with my roommate. You know, she was really into new age stuff. She started to influence me a little bit. So I started getting influenced somewhat. I was involved in the industry. I started uh I had a mentor, I had a music producer mentor who was helping me. He worked with major celebrities before. He got me some gigs. I was in music videos, backup dancing, but I wanted to be taken seriously so much in the arts because I knew I was creative. I knew I had these ambitions, but everything was so sexual and it was so pushed on me to just be sexual. It didn't matter my talent or what I wanted, you know, it was just always focused on my body. Like, we want you to show your body. We want you to do heels classes. We want you, if you are in a heels class, we're going to put you forward because, you know, we think you look sexy and we want you to be in the front. We want you to be in this music video. We want you to do a dance scene, but we're going to cut the parts. So it's only the parts that show your backside. Like, everything was so, um, it's like I couldn't stop it. Everything was just about being sexual. It didn't matter what I wanted, that I wanted to really, I genuinely wanted to be an artist, but I ended up being sucked in and pressured so much to be sexual. I ended up going the extreme end of sexual things, you know, posting photo shoots of me in lingerie, like things I never done before. And I was getting more and more desensitized, along with being more and more objectified in, like, even in music studio rooms, you know. So I had met some pretty big names, you know, and it was just, there's so much abuse, especially like sexual abuse in the industry. And in order for you to make it to certain levels, you have to do something sexual. Like, you have to. There's no way around it, unless you have a ton of money. Um, yeah, there were so many things that happened with that. But to go back to the new age stuff, all of this was going on with my ambitions, with my dreams, and trying to deal with this aspect of sexual abuse and all of these things going on. And at the same time, questioning my spirituality. And a couple months before COVID hit, I had this sensation that I needed to get off my medication. So I started weaning off of it. No matter what my psychiatrist said, she said, you know, you shouldn't do it. I started weaning off of it anyway. And I started to have more and more visions and like weird experiences where I'd wake up at night and just start uncontrollably saying things. And there was one point I was prophesying about COVID, and I didn't realize it was COVID. And to be honest with you, I don't believe it was from the Lord. I believe it was a psychic spirit. I don't believe it was the Holy Spirit. Um, During that time, I had a lot of mixing going on. So one of the ways I knew it wasn't of the Lord is because I was so severely tormented. Like, if I would wake up with a vision, my body, like, I would get so tormented even in my body. And once COVID hit, it was right in the beginning of COVID. Of course, I couldn't be involved in dance gigs anymore. The industry shut down. You couldn't, you know, go to auditions and stuff like that. And by this point, I had completely weaned off medication. And I was like, wow, I would be tormented at night. Like, it was so bad. And the nights were the worst. Um, I felt like my brain had been so controlled for so long by a drug that, especially the first night I was off, I had racing thoughts, like random images. And it wasn't a spirit, it was my brain. It was like my brain was overloaded with information suddenly being released that had been suppressed so long by medication. So it was very intense. And I really started to get a new age at this point. Things had already been leading up to it with other events going on in LA, but my roommate was constantly telling me, she said, you know, I have natural remedies to help you. I have psychedelics that will help your brain. She knew I would have supernatural experiences and all that. So she was like, this will help you with handling your spiritual gifts and, you know, opening up your third eye and also healing your soul. So She would make me crystal bracelets. I would start wearing it just harmlessly in my mind. I'm like, okay, I don't think it's going to do anything to help me, but it looks pretty at least. So I'll just wear it. Started wearing stuff like that. She went out of her way to make me pills with shroom powder in it. So you can actually take capsules like of microdosing shrooms. So that's what I started doing. She would make the pills for me and give it to me to take. And I was like, you know what? I think it's giving me some more peace. Um, so I'll just keep taking it. And then it ended up deeper and deeper. So, we weren't really working because of COVID. So I had all these hours in the day to read New Age books, watch New Age documentaries, watch Gaia, that channel, and look up videos and research religions. So that's what I was doing for hours. I was researching New Age information, reading books, microdosing, trying out meditation with my roommate. And so my roommate loved that I was finally acclimating to her religion. So this is when things escalated even more. I started tripping on shrooms. I had only done that maybe about 4 times. I did that. I went with her to a shaman ceremony that she had. It was called Bufo. And it's a toxin from a frog. It's kind of similar to ayahuasca, but it's more intense. So they believe if you want to do Bufo, you should do ayahuasca first. So my roommate she had done so many ayahuasca rituals already. And a lot of times you throw up because it's like a counterfeit deliverance. So they'll vomit and they believe you're vomiting up, trauma, you're vomiting up evil entities, that kind of thing. And then the next level is Bufo. It's more intense, and it is a toxin from a frog. I believe it's from the Amazon rainforest. I went with her to her Bufo ceremony, and it's smoke that you have to inhale. So the shaman preps the pipe, and she took it. And when I was sitting there, my roommate had explained to the shaman things that I was going through, and the shaman was like, "Oh, she has a psychic gift." So I was thinking of all these things. I remember being in her house. She had so many idols in the house, like from Hinduism, Buddhism, Native American religions, everything, all filled the house. So we were in the backyard for the ritual. And as soon as my roommate took the drug, she went back, and the other accompanying shaman was playing a drum and just playing music that's supposed to stir up the spirit, the mother Gaia spirit. And she just started writhing on the floor. So she was rolling, she was doing very sensual movements, kind of like a snake moving around. Her eyes were huge. Like she couldn't close her eyes, and she was like, like that, like looking up into the sky. And at this point, like even their dog just started howling and barking because the dog can feel the spirits. Everybody could feel it. And I felt it, and something overtook me. So I hadn't even taken the drug, but I was sitting in a chair. My hands started shaking. I jumped up and I couldn't control my body. I just ran. And I started jumping up and down and making this weird laughing sound. And I couldn't control my body, but it was a weird, like forced giggle. And then I finally went back to my seat and I was like, I don't know what that was. Like I couldn't stop myself. And after that situation, I never did an ayahuasca ceremony or anything myself. I did a yanni ceremony. So I had taken a drug called hape that you snort through your nose. So I experienced that from a shaman, but I didn't do the hardcore stuff like ayahuasca or bufo because I was scared, because I knew I was very sensitive. And I was like, if I go into another dimension, I may not come back. Like I was really scared of it. But my roommate did convince me to do LSD. So I took 2 tabs of LSD, and that for me was an overdose. And I didn't realize it until I was in it. And I was tripping for over 24 hours. It was like between 26 and 28 hours, I think, which is too long for an acid trip. And this was when I had a vision experience. I don't know if you want me to go into that,
Yeah, please
especially
do.
with the time. I can? Okay.
Yeah, don't stress about the
Um,
time.
okay, awesome. So this was when, so when I had taken the LSD, basically in New Age, you believe that as long as you have good intention, everything's going to be okay. You have to set your intentions in your heart with your words and say, I, want this to happen. And as long as you have respect for the drug and respect for the universe, for source, and all of that, respect for yourself, and you want a good outcome, then it will happen. And you shouldn't have to worry about a bad trip, as also if you're with good company. So I was with what I considered good enough company, even though I was having issues with my roommate, I knew she wouldn't hurt me. I had her friend who had become my friend, and she was heavily involved in New Age more than me herself. She had done plenty of ceremonies and she went through a lot of sexual abuse that she was trying to heal from. We sat in a circle. We had a couple things out on a blanket, like some crystals. We had incense, Palo Santo, sage, a couple things like that. We went around in a circle saying our intention. I don't remember what mine was. I think it was something like I don't know if it had to do with healing or just learning more about who I truly am, that kind of thing, something like that. And then we took the acid tabs, and it dissolves in your mouth. You're supposed to put it on your tongue, it dissolves. And when I took the 2 tabs, I had been fighting with my roommate on it because I was like, I'm really sensitive. I don't know if I can handle 2 tabs. I've never done it before. And she was like, don't worry about it. We all have to be on the same wavelength. So just take it. You'll be fine. She said, it's actually not as heavy of a trip as shrooms. So you'll be fine. I was like, oh, okay. So I took it. I still kind of didn't feel right, but I took it. And it was probably about 30 minutes in that I knew that I had done something really dangerous. So when you take psychedelics, what happens is, and this is explaining it just, not in a scientific sense or anything, but we all have a natural veil over our minds of what we can and cannot think about. So, if we're walking around doing something throughout the house, we may be thinking about our task, or we may be thinking about something that offended us earlier in the day, or thinking about something we want to do. There's so many things, but your mind still has a veil of not thinking about things that are not associated with what you want or what you like or what you've experienced. It's still in the realm of your will, of what your will is, right? Now, you may have intrusive thoughts that may come from demons, but even then, if you're not under full demonic possession, you still will end up being distracted by something else. There's still ways where you don't get fully engulfed in the thought. The thought doesn't fully take you in for hours and hours, unless, you have a really heavy demonic oppression or possession. Now, when you're on psychedelics, your will, like that veil that's over your mind, is gone. So if I'm just walking out and about, throughout the day, I'm not going to experience all of a sudden while I'm driving, thoughts that are taking me into a deep dark hole of, oh, I'm just an atom, you know what I mean? Like I'm just full of atoms, and then looking at yourself and you see all the atoms. But that's what happens when you're on psychedelics, especially something really heavy. And then what's even worse is when you get overtaken by the spirit of that psychedelic or whatever's around you, because you no longer have that natural veil that the Lord puts over our minds. Even when you're not with the Lord, there's always some type of control about your thoughts, right? Like if you get mad at someone, even if you're not a Christian, if you have a brief thought about punching them in the face, you're like, okay, like, let me stop thinking about that because it doesn't make me feel good. But when you're on psychedelics, you cannot stop. Whatever thoughts start happening, and it's much easier for you to receive the thoughts of whatever is around you, whether it's in the natural or spiritual. So I knew something really bad had happened to me. I had no control at all. I couldn't move. I had sunken into the couch. I got up for a brief second. My roommate's friend had taken some hape, which is that other drug I mentioned, because she felt like she was getting a little bit of anxiety. And she was like, I want to take this to help me heal from my past. She sat in a meditation pose. She took the hape and she started rocking back and forth. And I started feeling something different in the room. I stood up and I stood away from her. Then her eyes started rolling back. So her eyes started rolling back, her eyelids started fluttering, and she was rocking back and forth like this. And then she started making this sound. And God actually has taken away the memory of what the sound was. I think it was some type of clicking. Um, I don't remember exactly what it was, because even after I had gotten out of the trip, the thought of the sound was traumatizing to me, because it was a language. Yeah, I knew it was a language, but it was something that I never heard before. And it was so wicked. Like, I can't describe it. I just knew it was evil. And she started saying these things, whatever this language was. I knew in that moment when I was standing that the devil had come into the room. I started freaking out. And she didn't know. She told me later on that all she saw was disco lights. So she saw like lights, but she didn't know what was going on. I ran out of the apartment. I went outside, and she lived in like this community right by the beach. And there were people outside with their kids playing, families. I went out into this grass area. There was a fountain nearby before you got to the beach. And I sat in the grass just like I did years ago when I was having a manic episode, trying to ground myself, trying to feel like I was in my body. And I started gripping the grass like, I'm here, I'm here. I didn't leave. I'm here. And I heard a voice. It was, I knew it was whatever demon was coming onto my roommate's friend, because I knew something had come into her, like from the sky. Like, it was the ceiling. It was something that was coming into her and shooting out. I was terrified. I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? And it was someone else. I felt something come into me, like it was under my skin, and I felt it moving. And I knew it was, in my mind, it was so evil, and I had no control of my environment or anything. And in my mind, it was the devil himself, because I'd never heard these things. So at this point, I started screaming, and I was like, I called out for my roommate. I call her Allison. I was like, Allison, Allison, help, like screaming. People outside could tell I was on drugs. And so they started like grabbing their kids and like moving away from me. Um, it was telling me to do things, like there's certain things I heard during this time I can't repeat. It wanted me to do really disgusting, really evil things. And I couldn't stop the voice. And then I had like a vision. The demon was telling me what it was like to be in hell. And it was too much for me to bear. It was too much that my body couldn't take. So um, my roommate came outside and she was like, what's wrong? And I said, the devil came onto her. The devil is here. Like, I just kept saying that. And she was like, okay, come inside. Like, she like picked me up, helped me go inside. I was shaking. And my roommate's friend said, what happened? She was no longer in that state. She was just saying, what happened? Are you okay? Like, I'm so sorry. And so I explained what was going on. So my roommate was like, take Hape. So,
No way.
like, it's just one bad solution for a bad issue. Just like, just go deeper in it. Just take another drug. You'll be fine. So I took another drug. So I took
Oh,
Hape. And I felt like it calmed me down for like 2 minutes. And that was it. My roommate was holding me and I was shaking. She was just trying to calm me down because I couldn't calm down. I ended up on this trip. A couple hours later, I started seeing things. So my roommate's friend who was in that meditation, I saw her face contort to that demon that was talking to me. It was an old man. And even she was saying, she said, I'm having these weird feelings toward Jocelyn. Like, I feel so angry at her, but I don't know why I'm so angry at her. Like, I love Jocelyn. Like, why am I so angry? And when I turned and looked at her, that's when I saw her face contort to the man. And as soon as I saw that, I turned and I went, like, I ran to the bathroom and I threw up. I threw up, I think it was 3 times that night, which is one of the first signs of an overdose of acid. You're not supposed to throw up on it. So I threw up and it was black stuff. So I threw up all this black stuff in the toilet and there was red in it, like it was blood. That's what it looked like to me. It was black gunk and he like bits of blood. I stood up and I looked in the mirror and I said, Jesus, if you're there, save me. And I felt embarrassed and I whispered it because I didn't want my roommate and her friend to hear because they would have been like, why are you calling on Jesus? Like, we don't pray to Jesus over here. But in my mind, I hadn't fully rejected him. I was messing with a couple different things and I felt like, church didn't have the answers. Christianity wasn't explaining my supernatural experiences to me. I felt like it was all so surface level. So I was just looking for more, but I didn't fully reject, you know, Jesus being, the possibility of him being God. I didn't really know what to believe. But I was like, I have no other options. And I was like, even if Jesus is there, he probably wouldn't want to help me because of what I've done. So I went into the living room and it's so crazy because sometimes when I say this, this is part of my story, I can say it without crying. But then other times it's like, I don't think I'll ever get over what God did. And like, having this revelation of hell and being on a, overdosing. I don't think I'll ever, like, God has brought me through the pain of it and healed me from it. But it's something that I'm never going to be able to fully describe or fully understand how or why he loves me that much. So I went into the living room and I told my roommate that I felt like I was going to die, that I had to go to the hospital. I didn't know I had overdosed, and that's why I felt like I was going to die. And she said, we can't take you to the hospital because COVID is going on and you may get quarantined in there. So she said, you're going to have to ride through the trip. I'm sorry. And at this point, I didn't know that the acid tabs were made by her shaman, and her shaman was messing in both white and black magic. So it wasn't like regular acid that you find from your local drug dealer. It was created with magic, like actual, even though psychedelics are magic, but it was a deeper, darker level. And when I sat there on the couch, nighttime came and my roommate stayed with me. It was maybe, I don't know, maybe 2 hours after I asked for Jesus to help me, maybe one, I don't know. I couldn't keep track of time. There was no sense of time. I was like outside of it. And I remember I had this vision and it wasn't tangible, but once again, it was like I was dreaming. And I saw a man in white walking up to me. And um, I saw that I was being held by a woman that I knew. And the man came over to me and he knelt down in front of me and just stared me in my eyes. And he was like the most beautiful man I had ever seen. And nothing, like in a fleshly way, I'm saying this. It has nothing to do with that. No attraction, nothing sexual. It wasn't that at all. He was so beautiful with like, he was very masculine and very holy. I had never seen anyone look like this. And he looked me so deeply in my eyes, but he didn't say anything. It was like his eyes were just telling me, you know better, that you shouldn't be here. And it wasn't like he was condemning me, but it was almost like scolding, like discipline, like, you shouldn't have done this. You knew. And he told the woman who was holding me, he said, stay here with her. I have to tend to the rest. And when I turned, I saw there were thousands of people curled up like me, shaking, like having overdosed on drugs. They were all these people on drugs, like different types of drugs. And um, I know now that that was an angel. Like I believe, God has different angels that are assigned to different tasks. I don't believe it was Jesus himself. I believe it was an angel that was on a task that God had dispersed to different, like, I do believe that there's angels assigned to different tasks. And I believe this one was assigned to people that take drugs, that are overdosing. And when I saw that, I started uncontrollably preaching. Like, it just came out my mouth. And I told my roommate, Jesus is the only way to God, because God is too holy and so much greater than us. We need a bridge to him because we can't get to him directly. I started saying all this stuff. I wasn't even thinking, it just came out. And my roommate turned, she was like, "What?" She was like, "What are you talking about?" And I don't remember what else I said. I said something else. And I remember she was in deep thought, like, oh, like she didn't know what to say to me. Like, she hated Christianity. So she didn't know like what I was talking about. And the next day, I was still tripping. I was still in the trip. My roommate had to drive. I didn't sleep all night. I finally started coming out of the trip, and I took a shower, and I remember hearing the voice still, like whatever demon that was, and it was telling me, like, stay under the water and see how long you can hold your breath, like coming up with weird creative scenarios to die. And I was like, I'm coming out of the trip, but I still hear it. After that, I never took acid again. I never took shrooms again. I ended up leaving my roommate. I ended up working at a bike store in Venice Beach. I no longer worked in underground clubs. I stopped doing all that. Um, I was still working in the industry. I was still, doing videos. I was in some viral videos, like with other dancers, other, Instagram celebrities and stuff. But I, even after that experience, I still didn't come to Jesus. I still stayed in New Age. And it wasn't until things got worse, because there was like a demon from that acid trip that never fully left. And like the trauma of the voice and what it was telling me to do, and it was telling me like its thoughts, like how demons come up with the most creative, disturbing ways to hurt people and to do sexual things that I would have never thought of on my own, that people are incapable of thinking of on their own. And I was like, I'm being tormented because I have a psychic gift and I can't help that I can hear things around me. That's what I thought. And I still kept trying with new age stuff. And I was doing great off the medication. I was loving life. I was loving finally feeling like I had my own mind back to a certain degree. But it also exposed demonic things that were there all along. I ended up reaching out for help. I went through multiple deliverances. The first set of deliverances I went through, I know I was fully delivered, but I still had an issue with sex with a guy that I was seeing. I still didn't understand certain things, like how, same sex attraction. I'm trying to be careful with what word I say because I don't want you to get flagged. I still didn't understand how that was a sin, because I had been involved in all those things. And I ended up still holding on to some new age practices. I couldn't fully let it go. And because of that, I ended up with more demons, even worse than before. I left my job. I was jobless in LA, tormented. I ended up getting more deliverances again. And I was embarrassed. I told the woman who did the deliverance on me, I said, I know you did deliverance on me months ago, but I don't know why I couldn't let go of New Age. And there was still a part of me that couldn't understand Jesus. Like, I couldn't grasp it. And she was like, it's okay. We're going to go through this again. And this time I was fully saved. Before I even got deliverance from her, she was taking some time to get back to me through email. And she had her own life. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's her life. But I was so desperate. I ended up going to someone else for a deliverance, but he ended up hitting me during the deliverance. It was some random pastor that I needed help. I was so desperate for help. I was reaching out to anybody who would help, you know? Um, and I ended up one night just breaking down, and well, actually, it was during the daytime that I looked up a salvation prayer on YouTube, and it was some guy, Christian YouTuber, like, repeat after me. He said a salvation prayer. I was on my knees at my bed and I repeated the prayer. And this time, I meant it. I was like, I'm done with doing stuff. Jesus is God. Jesus is Lord to me. I'm not gonna, go back and forth and question, well, maybe he's a part of God, but there's because all of that opens doors to other demonic influences and theologies. And I was like, I'm no longer gonna be open to other religions. I'm done. And when I did that, my whole apartment filled with the smell of flowers. It was it was like a beautiful perfume, but natural perfume, not that chemical stuff. It was so nice. And I remember I got up and I looked like, are there flowers anywhere? Are there flowers right outside my window? No flowers anywhere. It was just Jesus's presence in the room. And so, yeah, so I went through more deliverances. I left LA. I came back to my hometown. My mom took me in once again, always ready to help me. And since then, like, my life has been so much better, so much more peace. I'm no longer, one of the main things the Lord has removed from me is chasing after ambitions, making ambitions my Lord. And that took some time to clean that out of me because I felt like something was missing or something was wrong because I wasn't being so ambitious anymore. But the Lord revealed to me, this has become your idol. I want to be your Lord first. And I want to show you all aspects of me, not just that I'm Lord, but that I'm your father, I'm your healer, I'm your friend. All of these things. He wanted to unravel different parts of himself to me and not have anything else from the world or my own perception of what success is or what love is or what happiness is to get in the way of that.
That's incredible. And so, how long have you been saved now and following Jesus?
It's been a little over 2 years.
That's incredible. And your
Yeah.
life has obviously changed so much. And I guess one of the questions that I had for you now that you've kind of arrived at this part of your testimony is, what does Jesus give you that none of those other practices can't? Because it seems to me that you were living a life that a lot of young people want, right? Like, you were making money. There's this big narrative in our culture right now that it's empowering for women to do things like stripping or to be able to make money from their bodies and stuff like that. Um, which I also want to ask you about. But I
Mhm.
think, yeah, firstly, what did Jesus do for you in your life that none of those practices could?
Jesus gave me rest and truth.
That's beautiful.
Um, it's as simple as that. And it seems like it's such a basic answer or a lot of people, but this is where we go wrong. We always searching for something so deep, but one of the reasons Jesus mentions so much in his word, and even just Father God, just God in general, they mention rest so much and the importance of rest. And a lot of people think it just has to do with taking time out to pray and worship, which, yeah, that's all part of it. I think there's different layers to what rest is, but ultimately, rest is just being a child again. Like, when you're a child and you actually have a good parent, you don't worry about things. You don't worry about what
Mm,
you're going to eat. You don't worry about what's true and what's not. When we're a child, we're not thinking all these deep thoughts like scientific thoughts of what this, I mean, some of us did when we were little. I know I kind of did, but you're not so concerned about life and where your life is going because you just rest in knowing that your parents got you, that they are taking care of you, that it doesn't matter what happens, that they're there. But with God, it's a whole other level of rest because not only are you able to rest in knowing that He's got you, that He's taking care of you as long as you abide in Him, but that He's like, when you give it up to Him to rest, He has your will. he has your future, your plans, your goals, your dreams, your future spouse, all of these things. Like, it's all in his hands. He's just the ultimate parent. So the rest is a huge factor. And it's one of the reasons why, like, yeah, we can talk about the fleshly and demonic natures of things like alcoholism and sex addiction and all of these things, but ultimately outside of the demonic aspect of it is that we can't rest because we're just looking so much, and sometimes we don't even know what we're looking for. But with Jesus, when you're resting in him, if you have a concern and you don't even know why you're looking for something or why you're concerned, he understands you more than anyone else because he created you. So you can just rest in that. And then the second part of it, which is truth, that's, the main reason why people go into New Age in general, why people are searching for different religious practices in the occult, is because people want truth and people want to be healed, and yes, there's an aspect where, you know, we have to let people know they need to repent. Yes, there is that aspect where we have to call people out. But we cannot forget the fact that people do these things. People are involved in different sexual lifestyles because they're searching for truth, because they want to be healed. And that's all I wanted. And I think one of the reasons why God has so much mercy is because even though he sees our heart, that our hearts are evil, he has so much compassion over the part of us that wants truth so badly, because we're searching for an absolute truth so badly. We want to know absolute truth. That's why in New Age, you never have rest, because you never get absolute truth. You're taught that there is no absolute truth, that any religion is right, that you can do what you want if you have right intentions. But then what is a right intention? You have no basis or foundation of what is good and what is bad. And actually, if you go deep into New Age, you are taught there is no such thing as good or evil, which is a Gnostic,
Mm.
that's a Gnostic belief system. A lot of people don't really know that till you go deep into it. But when you live with that type of knowledge, there is no rest in that. That's why God's laws are love. If we don't have that, we don't have absolute truth, which means we are always going to look, because we're made in his image. We have to know what is right or wrong. And if we don't know that and we're making that up for ourselves, we are condemning ourselves. Our own actions condemn ourselves, because we were made to be in his image, which we were made to be in his laws, which are love. And we don't understand that when we're in the world or we're in New Age. So we end up deeper and deeper in relative truths and never getting to the root of things. We just get all these rituals and practices, and you got to keep working and doing things. You got to take this psychedelic. You got to go see this shaman. You got to do ice baths now and meditate while you're doing an ice bath. It's so many things. Not that ice baths are wrong. If you take ice baths, that's cool. I think it is good for your health. But everything in New Age is spiritualized. So then they'll add a spiritual aspect to that, and connecting with source through the ice bath. It's just so many works, and there's no rest because you never get to the absolute truth. And with God, he gives that because he is that.
Amen. Amen. Yeah. And so I know I am conscious that we're running a bit over time and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I really did want to ask you a little bit, because it seems half of your story is spent, dancing and sort of chasing a certain lifestyle, and then the other half spent dealing with a lot of the new age practices. And I've seen you've spoken a lot on YouTube about the new age practices, but I really wanted to pick your brain a little bit. What's your opinion now with like OnlyFans and with girls becoming, I think, increasingly keen to sort of generate money from their sexuality? Is that something that you view as empowering now, or do you view that as them opening themselves up to exploitation? I just want to get your thoughts on like that sort of industry.
Yeah, definitely. So all of that is exploitation. It's all worship of the body. It's worship of self. Um, it's all sexual sin. And it's really interesting because the enemy tricks us into thinking we're empowering ourselves. Because I remember the first time I stripped, and I didn't want to take my top off on stage. I was like, I don't want to do this. But they had me partner up with another girl, and she, made me feel comfortable doing it because she did it. And she was trying to like warm me up to it. And then the first time I did it by myself, I remember there was a man that pulled me aside who was like a client, and he said, I can tell you try to cover up your chest a lot. He said, I think you're really self-conscious about your body and your chest area. He said, but I just want to tell you, you are so beautiful. You shouldn't be covering it up. You should just let it out. Like, there's no reason to be ashamed of your body. And it's so interesting because the enemy comes in forms that you want, because women, especially because nowadays we're lacking the father in the household, we're lacking men that carry, the fatherhood of God, the masculinity of God, and they don't understand it because they've been hurt themselves, and there's such an imbalance in society of people not knowing their roles because they don't know God himself. So because of that, women are turning to sexuality because they're craving not just the father's love, but we have it in us as women to be adorned by a man. Because I think it's even in, I think it's in Isaiah. Sometimes I confuse Isaiah with Ezekiel. But there is a passage where God is talking about Israel, and he always calls Israel like a woman. He says she, her. And in this passage, he's speaking to the prophet, and he's saying that, you know, I saw you when you were covered in blood. So he's saying when he first encountered Israel, she was covered in blood, she was naked. And it talks about how God passed by her, and then he cleaned her up, and he passed by her. I believe in the passage it says like 2 times. The second time when he passed by her, he saw it was her time of love, it says. And then he adorned her. He put jewelry on her. He put earrings on her. He gave her clothes. He adorned her in jewels. He gave her the finest foods and all these things. And people, take that as, symbolism, but there's a reason why God is constantly using the symbolism of a man and a wife, of a man and a woman, and what God does for us as Christians. We of course we always say how, a husband and wife are, the image of God's covenant with the church. But we don't go deeper into understanding, even looking at these passages with the prophets, the Lord is showing us what women need. They need to be adorned by a man. And actually, the man gets fulfillment from that. God got fulfillment from adorning Israel. Not that he, needs that to be God. I'm not saying that. He has power on his own, obviously. But it pleases him. Just like when he created nature, it shows in Genesis all these things he created, and he said, I saw it was good. God saw it
Mm.
was good. And women are a reflection of that. Women show that, and we have it built in our DNA. Like, we cannot help that. And when we're not receiving that properly, and of course, I'm not blaming this all on the men. We have, women have issues too, but this is why we have to seek the Lord. If you didn't receive that from a man, or you're not receiving that at all, you have to go to the Lord. He's going to adorn you. He's going to look at you in awe. And one of my first experiences with that, was after my deliverance. I was taking a shower, and I was still shaking. And it was actually after this that I experienced the baptism of the Holy Spirit. I felt the Lord so strongly, and it was there in the shower. And of course, it was nothing sexual. Like, God sees us when we're naked, He sees us when we're doing anything. And I felt the Lord, it was so strong. He was admiring me. He was saying, like, wow, you are so strong and you are so beautiful. And it was after that that I experienced the baptism of the Holy Spirit. And I was alone in my apartment. And I think this is so important because God knew I had such a deficit in me, not just from childhood, but from all the sexual abuse, the sex work. The Lord knows what we need as women. And when we go searching for that, and then we get these counterfeit affirmations from men in the world who have lust, who have their own sexual addictions, they're telling you, stop covering up because you should be proud of your body. That's the enemy twisting a natural truth in us, where we naturally want to cover up, because even the Bible says the Lord is covered. God is clothed. It says even God is clothed. There's a reason why we're supposed to wear clothes. We're supposed to be covered, not just because of sin, because even in heaven, we're going to have new robes.
Mm.
So this is when you wear something, it is it is a communication of your level of holiness, of your status and your identity, which is why even in the same-sex community, they'll say, we're not our clothes, we're not this, we're not going to be identified by, our sexual lifestyle. But look at what they're wearing. Your clothes are always, it's part of your expression of your identity, and it's a language. You're communicating. The Lord understands this. So when we're listening to a counterfeit voice, where we think we're getting the affirmation that we're looking for, because that's what women are looking for. They want to be adorned, they want to be loved. And when you receive that, it heals and completes a part of a woman that causes her to step into her role and to give. And when you're searching for these things on social media, and the only way that women feel like they can get it is through sexually exposing themselves. And it always leaves you empty, and it's going to lead you to go deeper and deeper. You may think that you're starting off on OnlyFans, like, okay, I'm not actually having sex, I'm just posting nude photos or whatever. But that's the first step. And you get desensitized more and more and more to using your body to receive a form of worship, to receive men's addictions, to receive their lust. And because women are the ones that give birth, because we are the ones that receive into us, and the Lord breathes into us so that we receive a whole new soul inside of us, we are very sensitive to these things. And then we don't realize how deep it goes. And then this is why we see so many women who have slept with so many men and have OnlyFans. And you could see it with these female celebrities that are on reality TV shows. They're losing their minds. It's not because of the drama, and the money. It has to do with the sex. It has to do with the ways that they've been searching for the man, um, searching for God in a man, and that fulfillment that only comes from God. So yeah.
Thank you, and that's a powerful place now for you to talk about your book a little bit, maybe. So maybe you could kind of show us that. I'm going to link in
Yes.
the description box below where people can pick that up, if you don't mind showing us.
Yeah. Okay. So it's called New Age versus Christianity: The Hidden Dangers and Deceptions of Spiritual Healing. So this is what it looks like. You can get it on Amazon. It's on Target's website, Walmart. I believe even the Barnes and Noble website has it. But you can get the hard copy. You can also get it on Kindle if you want to read like from your tablet or something.
That's awesome. I'll even be able to pick it up here in Australia then. So I want to thank you again, Jocelyn, for coming on. Thank you for your time and for your vulnerability. You've shared a lot of things, and that must take a lot of bravery. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.